My guest today is Dr. Carrie Dress. Now, Dr. Carrie Dress is the author of a number of books, including The Anti-Marry Exposed, Theology of Home, and her most recent book, Theology of Home 2, which she co-authored. Now, Dr. Carrie Dress holds a doctorate degree in philosophy, and she is a mother who I've learned so much from in her beautiful reflections, both from her theology and philosophy and her experience as a parent. Dr. Dress, welcome to Trending.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Now, Dr. Dress, I'm excited to unpack your most recent book. It was incredible timing for me to pick up because I had just moved. We're also expecting a baby. And your book truly spoke to my heart. Now, some of the gentlemen might be listening up saying Theology of Home. Okay, I'm out. This really does relate to you as well. I think you can take these principles and really apply them to your own conversation in terms of how you find yourself at home. But Dr. Dress, what inspired you to write the book? And let's unpack some of those initial themes you place in the book.
Yeah, well, of course, the first Theology of the Home book, Theology of Home book, really focused on the home itself and just the basic principles of things like light and nourishment and, all these elements that we deal with in the home. And it wasn't so much how to design the home, but more why we have this desire to design our homes, and how home is really meant to be this foreshadowing of heaven. But the second book, Noel Mehring, my co-author, and I really decided that there was something missing in the first book. And that was really recognizing that homes don't make themselves, that there actually needs to be a homemaker. And this is one of the, I think, real blind spots in our culture today is we love the home. We love decorating our homes. We love cooking. We love sewing, like all these new trends that come back to the home. Then, of course, we've all been stuck in our homes. But, what better place to be stuck than our homes? We haven't been refugees and things like that. So that has been a blessing. But we loathe the word homemaker. And we just thought, there's really a problem here because somebody has got to make the home. And so many of us are doing that in smaller and large ways, and yet nobody wants to be called that. And I thought, can we rehabilitate this word? Because it just doesn't make sense that we have so stigmatized it and made it to be so little, when in fact there's something really great and amazing and wonderful about serving those people around us by making a home for them where they feel known and loved and treasured, and they can they can be, grow into their own potential. They just feel comfortable. There's a sense of sanctuary. All of these things we all yearn for and long for in our hearts. So that was really the desire to dig deeper into that aspect that, homes can't be robots, but there's really got to be somebody there to make all of these things work.
There's a tremendous amount of dissatisfaction for many people with regard to being at home, whether it has to do with being home and alone, or even burdened with responsibilities of family and children. And so many say, I would rather be at work. I feel better. I feel happier, more fulfilled at work. And so you, at the kickoff of your book, mentioned the 3 elements to evaluate career happiness by author Patrick Lencioni. I'd love to walk through those 3, how people feel fulfilled in work when those 3 are present, and how that relates to what it looks like when we're at home. So the first one is, am I respected in my job? Let's talk about this both from the workforce perspective and the home.
Yeah, no, this is one of those things that's just, it's always remarkable how unrespected women are, especially those of us that stay at home with our children, and how it's just kind of seen like an odd thing, or why would you do that? You've thrown away your degree or whatever that is. And so I think that is one of the biggest challenges. All 3 of these are, of course, challenges. But to be in this situation where you constantly feel like what you're doing isn't worthwhile, that's a really heavy reality. And I think it's the same thing, as Pat Lencioni makes the point, that it's the same situation if you're in a job where you don't feel like this is the case. Then, most people would say, find a new job. But if you're determined to sort of make your family and your home a priority, you're not usually encouraged to do that, overtly, unless you're surrounded by, great friends and family who really appreciate your mission. So, yeah, I think that's one of the big struggles that those of us who are homes really face.
Well, and I look at it, am I respected in my job? If you're someone who has chosen to be at home with your children, to, stay primarily in that role, a lot of women are now, working from home part-time as well. This looks a little different for everyone, but
Mm-hmm.
many feel disrespected or unappreciated,
Mm-hmm.
might we say,
Yeah.
at home. And so if you're in a job, you'd say, okay, look for a different job, like you said. But if you're at home, many women are said, well, why don't you go to work? Or why don't you,
Mm-hmm.
get a job? And even a lot of spouses will say that to their wife when they start to feel
Mm-hmm.
dissatisfied.
Right.
So how do you kind of flip that in the context of this
Mm-hmm.
book?
Yeah. Well, in so many different ways, of course. And as you mentioned, it's just funny thinking about how your clients really are your children, and it's not like they're giving you kudos all the time. So, yeah, I think that that's the other challenging factor is you get it from the outside, but you get it from the inside as well. But I think one way that we flip this is just recognizing what the, what we're doing is actually incredibly important and impacts the culture in dramatic ways. And I think we have to sort of look at motherhood as something and homemaking really as something that happens kind of invisibly. It's a lot of the behind the scenes things that, and actually in one book we even talk about snow, how we compare it to snow and Our Lady and her grace to snow as well. But it starts and there's like no drama usually. It's not a big storm usually. It just is very quiet. And it's only with the accumulation that you start to realize, it's really building up to something bigger. And I think that that's one of the things that we have to be mindful of is that these things, this is a marathon. This is not a sprint. You're not going to get quick rewards on it necessarily all the time. Yes, of course, they appear in great smiles and great relationships that you're building up and, and interactions that you have with your children and other family members. But there's a lot of really hard points to that. But again, it's keeping the eye on the goal. I mean, that's what the marathon runner does. Is they're not out there just to run. They want to finish. They want to get to that goal, and I think that that's what we have to be mindful of as with motherhood as well, and
That's
homemaking.
That's Dr. Carrie Dress, author of the new book, Theology of Home 2. The two other elements to evaluate career happiness are, do I know why my job matters? And am I progressing in my work? And is there a measure for this progress? These two questions really remind me, Dr. Dress, of the fact that parents are told that their presence to kids is obsolete. It's not
Mm-hmm.
necessary. And in fact, our lifestyle of kids going from school to activities emphasizes that you don't need to be there. They're fine.
Mm-hmm.
They'll be raised by someone else or they'll just grow up on their own. And so this
Mm-hmm.
idea that my job matters or that I'm progressing in my job or work at home is really confusing for many parents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think undoubtedly. Certainly the labor aspect of it has been diminished significantly because we're not out foraging or knitting or, canning for the winter and all that kind of stuff. But there's also even just what we got from radical feminism, which is this very mistaken notion that children they just grow. They sort of raise themselves. That parenting really is insignificant. And yet,
They're
we now have
succulents. You just need
they're
to maybe an
succulents.
ice cube here and there.
Exactly. It doesn't really take much work. And of course, all the social sciences and all the data is now showing, that just it's not true. And that there's a significant role that parents do play, both mother and father, and how important both of those pieces really are in raising a very healthy, mature Christian adult. So I think that that's another important matter as well. So yeah, absolutely, we have to be mindful of what is actually happening. Oh, and the other thing I would add too is just it's been interesting to look at the research under the lockdowns. There was an article that was out maybe a week or two ago about how teenagers are really flourishing because they're having more time. They're probably getting more sleep. They're also having a lot of time with their families that they didn't have before. And they're having a lot less time where they're pressured into, where they're dealing with all that social anxiety that can come up a lot of times, especially now with all the pressures of social media and, all the things that are going on in the culture. So it's interesting to see that this slowing down has had a very beneficial response or beneficial effect on teenagers in particular.
That is so good to see. You know, we hear so much about the message of how COVID has been so difficult on people, but there are a lot of kids, teenagers who have actually loved being home. Even if
Yeah.
that has meant a little less time with their friends and in the
Hmm.
activities that they enjoy, they really do love the rest that they wouldn't otherwise benefit from.
Yeah.
So,
And that family time as well, for sure. Yeah.
so how can we help parents, especially mothers, better understand why their job matters?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is to really recognize what it means to raise children, but also to be a homemaker and to be present to others. I think that one of the things that we did in this book was we didn't want this to be just for women that stay at home, or even just women that have children. But we also wanted to recognize that there's a spiritual element to every woman, that we're all called to spiritual motherhood. Some of us are called to biological motherhood, but that doesn't negate the spiritual motherhood that we're called to, which is to mother others. And I think that this is really the key piece that we're missing, because we focus so much in this culture on control and power, and that those are the important things, and not really this understanding of how do we help people grow, how do we love them to help them become the person that God wants them to be, and use their gifts in a way that makes them happy, but also makes the whole world, benefits from that. So I think it's a more big picture kind of response to that, for all women.